All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at something pretty significant, I think, in the whole conversation about trans rights. It's a recent speech from Lena Dunham.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And, obviously, Lena Dunham, writer, director, girls, all that, big activist, uses her platform pretty often for, different causes.
Yeah.
But what makes this speech really stand out is that she hasn't been, super public recently. So this was kind of a moment.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's even more interesting when you think about all the stuff happening politically, right? Like all these laws targeting trans people. It feels like almost every day there's a new one. So to have someone like Lena Dunham, who, lots of people listen to, speak up like this, it definitely makes you pay attention.
Right, exactly. Like words actually carry weight in this kind of environment. So our goal today is to really break down why this specific speech has gotten so much attention and, what it might mean for the bigger picture of trans rights. Okay, so first let's just set the scene. What do we actually know about the speech itself?
Well, from what we've gathered, it was delivered at a recent event. We don't have the exact name, but, imagine something like a rally or maybe a panel discussion.
Okay.
And the whole vibe, from what I understand, was super emotional. It was about really taking a stand for trans people, especially with all these political attacks happening.
Yeah.
It's not just theoretical anymore. It's really affecting people's lives.
Exactly. And I think, we have that quote that really sums up her message. It was trans rights are human rights. We can't just sit back and watch politicians take away healthcare, dignity, and safety from our trans siblings.
Ugh, yeah. So powerful.
Right. It's so direct, and it's no beating around the bush.
And it's so necessary, especially when you consider, how many anti-LGBTQ bills have been introduced just this year. Over 500. It's crazy. And a huge chunk of those are specifically aimed at trans youth. That's who they're going after.
Yeah, it's scary. And it's not just vague proposals. We're talking about things like trying to block access to puberty blockers for trans kids, like actual medical care, or even making it a crime for doctors to provide gender-affirming care.
It's terrifying, really. These bills, they directly contribute to a climate of fear and discrimination. And that's exactly what Lena Dunham was calling out.
Right. And that kind of leads to the bigger question. Why does this particular speech, why does it matter so much? Obviously, Lena Dunham has a pretty big platform, but how much influence can she really have on public opinion and changing the narrative around trans rights?
All right, well, that's the interesting thing about celebrities, right? They have this ability to kind of break through the noise. Someone like Lena Dunham with her audience could reach people who might not normally pay attention to LGBTQ issues.
Yeah.
They might not follow activists on social media or read in-depth articles, but they might see a headline about Lena Dunham, and it could be their first real exposure to these ideas.
Right. And from what I've read, her speech didn't just vaguely express support. She actually named some of the very real threats that the trans community is facing right now. We were talking about the bans on gender-affirming care, but also just the constant negative portrayal and misinformation in the media.
Absolutely. And that's a really important point because, general solidarity is great, but when you start highlighting the actual harm, like denying medical care or the mental health impact of all this hate, it suddenly becomes a lot more real for people.
Yeah. It's not just an abstract debate anymore.
Exactly. And we have some pretty stark figures that back this up too. We know that a bunch of states have outright banned gender-affirming care for minors, which is just devastating. And then there's the research showing that trans youth suicide rates are way higher when they don't have adequate support. I mean, those are the harsh realities that Dunham was trying to bring to light.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, but let's move into something a little more complex, which is, this idea of allyship. It's not always simple. And Lena Dunham herself has been criticized in the past. I mean, specifically back in 2017, when she defended a girls' writer who was accused of transphobia.
Right.
So how does that history, how does it affect how people view this recent speech?
Well, I think it brings up a really important point about growth. We all make mistakes, right? And Dunham's past actions definitely hurt people, and they raised some legitimate concerns about her understanding of trans issues at the time. But what's important is what she's done since then.
Yeah.
From what we've seen, she seems to have really committed to learning, to listening to trans voices, and to trying to use her platform more responsibly.
Right. So it's acknowledging that people can change and learn from their mistakes.
Exactly.
And I think that's kind of reflected in the different reactions to this speech, right? Like, on the one hand, you have a lot of activists who are really grateful that someone with her visibility is speaking out on these issues. But then you also have people who are criticizing her, saying that true allyship means centering trans voices, not taking center stage yourself.
Yeah, and that's a really valid debate. There are a lot of different opinions within the LGBTQ community about the best way for allies to support the movement. Like, is it more important to amplify the voices of trans people themselves? Or is it also valuable for allies to use their platforms to educate a wider audience?
Right. And it's not necessarily one or the other. I mean, especially when trans people are facing so much hate and negativity, having someone like Lena Dunham speak out can reach people who might not otherwise hear these stories.
I agree. But I think the key takeaway here, and something that a lot of activists emphasize, is that these statements of support need to be followed up with action. Allyship isn't just about words. It's about actively working to dismantle discriminatory systems and actually supporting the trans community.
Absolutely. So, I mean, this brings us to something really important for our listeners. Lena Dunham's speech reportedly included a call to action, and we want to bring that directly to you guys. So what are some concrete things that people can do if they're moved by her words, or just, if they want to support trans rights?
Well, if we're talking about effective advocacy, I think there are a few key areas where people can make a difference. First off, donating to organizations that directly serve the trans community is huge. Like groups like the Transgender Legal Defense Fund, they provide legal support and fight against discriminatory laws.
Yeah.
And then there's the Trevor Project, which offers crisis intervention and suicide prevention services for LGBTQ youth. Those are both such critical resources.
They really are. And, beyond financial support, another really powerful thing you can do is contact your elected officials. Let them know that you oppose anti-trans legislation and that you support policies that protect trans people. Your voice actually does matter, even if it doesn't always feel like it.
And don't underestimate the power of just amplifying trans voices in your own circles. Share their art, listen to their stories, help counter all the negativity and misinformation that's out there. It's about centering the lived experiences of trans people themselves.
For sure. And lastly, I think something everyone can do is just commit to ongoing self-education. There are so many amazing resources out there. There's that book, Trans Liberation by Leslie Feinberg, which is kind of a foundational text. And then there's activists like Chase Strangio, who's doing really important work.
Right. That constant learning is so important. It helps us move beyond just a surface level understanding and really get into the complexities and nuances of trans experiences.
Okay, so to kind of wrap things up, I think Lena Dunham's speech, even with all the baggage from her past and the complexities of allyship, is a good reminder that it's an ongoing process. Being an ally isn't just a label. It's about constantly taking action, being willing to learn, and growing.
Totally. And like Dunham said, silence is complicity. That's a pretty powerful statement, especially now when trans people are under attack. Not speaking up can actually contribute to the harm.
Yeah, I agree. So for everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has given you some context around this speech, but more importantly, we hope it's given you some concrete ways to get involved and show your support.
Absolutely. This isn't a passive issue. It's an ongoing conversation and a really important fight for justice and equality. So we encourage you to keep learning, stay engaged, and find ways to be active ally.
Totally. So here's a question for you to think about.
Yeah.
What's your next step? How are you going to turn what you've learned into meaningful action to support the trans community?
That's what we want to know.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.
See ya.